In this video, I will address the question of how faith healers give the impression that they have the ability to cure people. First, I want to note that a surprising number of people suffer serious consequences or death as a result of faith healing. For example, in 1975, Dr. William Nolan studied 23 people who claimed that they had been cured during the services of faith healer Kathryn Kuhlman. Nolan concluded that none of the 23 were actually cured. One woman, who believed herself to have been cured of spinal cancer, threw away her leg brace and ran across the stage during the service. Her spine collapsed the next day and she died 4 months later. Dr. Nolan believed that Kuhlman was sincere but misguided. However, Kuhlman died in 1976 after open heart surgery, suggesting that she didn't rely on faith healing for herself. A review published in 1998 looked at 172 children who had died of cancer after their cancer was treated by faith healing instead of by conventional medicine. It concluded that most of the children had cancer that, if it had been treated conventionally, would have had less than a 1 in 10 chance of proving fatal. At least 6 HIV positive people are known to have died after being told that faith healing had cured their HIV, and they, as a result of being told that, ceased taking their medication. One former faith healer's mentor told him that, quote, "It's okay if we have to fake it a little bit because people need to see the power of God, and it's okay if we have to fudge things to make that happen," unquote. This same person said that their fake cures, quote, "portrayed a deeper reality," unquote. So to move on to some of the techniques that faith healers use. Many people assume that everyone in a wheelchair is completely unable to walk. In reality, many people in wheelchairs can walk short distances, although it might be painful and is probably going to be slow or unsteady. So if a faith healer commands a person in a wheelchair to stand up and walk, they'll often be able to do so. And this can give the impression, if you assume that they were completely unable to stand up and walk, something miraculous or unusual has happened. Similarly, 75% of legally blind people have some vision, usually enough to pass some sort of test, such as counting fingers held close to their face. Faith healer W.V. Grant would test blind people in this way, but would simply tell them the number. He'd hold the microphone away from his lips when he was telling them the correct number. They would then give it back, and it would seem as if they'd seen that number for themselves. There is a specific trick or technique called the leg stretch. What happens is the faith healer has a member of the congregation sit in a chair on the stage and give the symptoms that they wish to be cured. Whatever these symptoms are, the faith healer says, well, you have one leg shorter than the other. The faith healer raises their legs, and you can see that one of them looks shorter than the other. The faith healer prays, and the shorter leg appears to lengthen until the two legs are the same length. There's two ways to do this. Firstly, the faith healer may slightly loosen one of the congregants' shoes, making that leg appear longer. As they pray, they gently push the shoe back. The faith healer, of course, will know by experience which types of shoes are easy to manipulate in this way. The best footwear for this is boots, such as cowboy boots. Another thing the faith healer can do is hold the congregant's legs at a slight angle to their body, which of course means that the heels won't line up, which in turn gives the impression that the legs are different lengths. The faith healer prays, they adjust their position so that the legs gradually are no longer at an odd angle, and they seem to be the same length. At least 2 faith healers, W.V. Grant and Kathryn Kuhlman, the aforementioned Kathryn Kuhlman, brought a number of wheelchairs to their services and told healthy congregants to sit in them. During the service, they would command the people sitting in the wheelchairs to stand up and walk, which of course gave the impression that they had been cured of some disability which stopped them from walking and forced them to be in a wheelchair. Several faith healers claim to have what they call the word of knowledge, meaning that God gives them information about people at their services, such as their names or medical conditions. Peter Popoff had attendees at his services fill out cards with their names and their problems that they wanted the faith healer to address. Popoff had a radio receiver in his ear which was disguised as a hearing aid, and then his wife would transmit information to him reading off the cards, and he would speak this information as if he was receiving it from God. A similar technique is called billet reading, or the envelope trick, or the one ahead trick. This is actually similar to the technique that I used in a video demonstrating a card trick in which I seemed to be able to predict the suits of the next card that will be picked up. The way it works in the case of faith healers is that firstly everyone has to write down their name and the problem that they've come to the faith healer for. This is all put in an envelope. The envelopes are sealed. The faith healer has a single accomplice in the audience, and they arrange beforehand what this accomplice will pretend to have written. So they might say, I'm worried that my husband Robert might be cheating on me. So the faith healer chooses an envelope at random, and they might hold it up to their forehead, or they might pray, or whatever act they do. They pretend to be sensing the message that's been agreed on beforehand. So they say, the Lord tells me to say that your husband Robert is not unfaithful. He's actually just working late, hoping to get that promotion. And then the accomplice stands up and says, that was me, and is amazed. And then the faith healer opens the envelope and pretends to be reading out what is written on the paper, but is actually reading the prearranged message out loud. And what they're doing is they remember the message that a congregant has written down. So the paper might say, I'm scared about the fact that I need to get x-rays. So they remember that. They get another envelope and they say, now the Lord's telling me that there's someone here who's worrying about some x-rays. Now, of course, that person is genuine. And so they will obviously respond and they'll be amazed. And this can go on more or less indefinitely. The faith healer opens the envelope, reads the new message, and then pretends to be receiving the new message when they look at the next one. And every one of them will be a genuine person except for the first one. I now want to talk a little bit about psychic surgery. Psychic surgery is a technique where a person comes on stage. Usually the person is not an accomplice. They're usually a genuine member of the congregation. And the faith healer seems to reach into their stomach and remove tumours or other harmful material without the patient feeling any pain. What's happening is they have small plastic bags which they fill with solid material and fake blood. The blood might be animal blood. It might be something like corn syrup, water and flour and food colouring. And then there's the solid materials, might be animal material that they bought from a butcher's, or it might be something like cotton. So the plastic bags are tied with a knot. The faith healer has bowls filled with water and small towels which they use to clean the patient's stomach before the procedure. This gives them an excuse to reach into the bowls. One of the bowls has these plastic bags. That's obviously kept in such a way that the audience and patient can't see it. The bags are small enough that the faith healer can hold a bag using only their thumb, which gives the impression that they don't have anything in their hand. So the faith healer, with this bag in their hand, rolls or pinches the patient's skin. Their flattened hand reaches under the roll of skin, slowly tightening, and it even can look to the patient as if the faith healer's fingers are entering the patient's body. Of course, the patient might psychosomatically feel the fingers going in as well. The faith healer can then either just break the bag, or they can, if the knot is tied right near the top, they can undo the knot with their thumb. And then, of course, the patient seems to bleed because all this material flows out. The faith healer then extracts the solid material, and the plastic bag is dyed with whatever they're using for blood, and it's also in with the other solid material, and so it just seems to be organic material. That all being done, the faith healer reaches into a bowl for a towel to clean the patient and takes another sealed plastic bag. Generally, the faith healer will claim that they've removed cancerous material. If they're in a country where belief in evil spirits is prevalent, the psychic surgeon will sometimes pretend to remove objects like shards of glass and say that evil spirits, put this in your body and that was what was causing your pain. This practice started in the Philippines in the 1940s. It then turned up in Brazil in the 1950s. It's not clear whether it was imported or it developed separately. The Brazilian practitioners claimed that they were channeling the spirits of dead doctors. Other techniques are much simpler than that. The psychic surgery is about as elaborate as it gets. Some faith healers simply say that they've received a message from God that a particular member of the church has cancer, and then they received another message from God that they've cured that cancer. Simple as that. There's an evangelist named David Hogan who claims to have raised over 400 people from the dead, but he never tries to do this at his meetings. He simply makes this claim. Those who pass on those stories sometimes give the impression that they've witnessed the event themselves, and so as it passes from person to person, the story can become, I saw this guy raise someone from the dead, as opposed to, or I know someone who saw this guy raise a person from the dead, as opposed to what it really is, which is there's a man who tells everyone that he's raised people from the dead, but no one's ever seen him do it. Sometimes faith healers, particularly those with large audiences and particularly those who broadcast on TV, will say, right now there's a woman named Catherine who has stomach pains and she's being healed, something like that. It's quite likely that there is a woman named Catherine in the audience that maybe has stomach pains and perhaps has a temporary relief of their symptoms. If they write in to say they were healed, well, that's proof. If no one fits the description, there's no evidence of failure. As with anyone else who claims to do something that they can't do, faith healers need to have an excuse for failure. And the common one is simply that the sufferer lacked faith or didn't have sufficient faith. A congregant of faith healer Francis Hunter said that he still felt pain after being healed, and Francis Hunter accused him of, quote, denying what God wanted for him, unquote. Another faith healer called W.V. Grant healed a woman with a heart condition and had her run up and down the aisle of his church. When she turned red and collapsed, Grant announced that she was drunk and had her friends carry her away.